What's up, Earth Rockers? It's your boy Shovitar here to talk about the last alternate mode for Lament of Innocence, the second of two, which is a very strange alternate mode. I would say conceptually unprecedented in the Castlevania series. You could argue it's almost a glorified joke, but I'll explain what I mean by that now, actually. So this is Pumpkin mode. In Pumpkin mode, you play as a little funny pumpkin man, and he plays identically to Leon Belmont, the protagonist of the game, meaning he has the whip, he has the inventory, he can pick up money, he has hearts for sub-weapons, although he only has one sub-weapon, which I'll talk about. And the reason I say this is unprecedented is that typically in these games, you have a main mode where you play as a Belmont protagonist, usually Belmont protagonist, and then you have an alternate mode with no RPG elements, no inventory screen, no armor, no nothing. So this is kind of a... and the trade-off in those alternate modes is usually that the character will have much more... much stronger offensive power. Because having no inventory means having no potions, no armor to protect you. So with those alternate mode characters, typically they'll be taking more damage, but then to compensate, they'll be doing more damage. Pumpkin mode is interesting because it's kind of a mix of those two, where, as you perhaps might be able to tell if you're familiar with what the base game of Harmony of Dissonance looks like, the Pumpkin starts off with much less health and much less MP than Leon Belmont does. But, as you also might notice, he does way more damage at baseline. He starts off with the Vampire Killer, which Leon doesn't get until, I guess I would say, almost, I guess like the last 20% of the game, I would say. Maybe more like the last 30%. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Not important. So that's the basic idea, is that you're kind of playing as Leon, but what if Leon had less health and did way more damage? Which is interesting, but due to the nature of Lament of Innocence, it's also a little bit redundant. Like, it kind of feels more like you're just playing the main game again, but with, like, the cutscenes removed, because you might think that the fact that he has less health makes the gameplay more difficult or more dangerous, and I suppose I would have to concede that it does in a few niche cases, but most of the time your higher damage output will very much make up for the fact that you don't take that you're going to be taking much more damage, proportionally speaking. I should mention the heart counter. You start off not only with less health and more damage, but also much more hearts, much more maximum hearts than Leon does, which is honestly not really relevant for a while, because the only sub-weapon that the Pumpkin gets is the Pumpkin Bomb, and the Pumpkin Bomb is really not very good, especially because the Pumpkin's whip does so much damage. I will say that the part of the reason why this doesn't feel very different or that challenging just has to do with my personal level of familiarity with the game. I collected this footage last, after I'd already played the game extensively, as Leon, so I kind of already knew the ropes for all the most dangerous encounters. So I suppose if you were playing the game more casually, you didn't, like, autistically learn every boss fight, then it would probably feel different, but for me, it really did not. It was just kind of like... it was just like playing as Leon again. When I say that the inventory screen and, like, the money and the shop is in Pumpkin mode, that includes the keys and the locked doors. If you haven't watched my previous video about Lament of Innocence, I'll explain this briefly. So in every one of the first 5 levels of Lament of Innocence, there are locked doors, and you have to find the key for those doors in other levels. Now, you don't have to get anything behind any of these doors if you don't want to, so it's not forcing you to backtrack. But what it does is it means that if there's something you want in, say, the House of Sacred Remains, and the key to that door in House of Sacred Remains can be found in the Anti-Soul Mystery Labs, then you would want to do, like, the labs first to get the key, then go to the house to get to unlock the door. So it's kind of what guides your routing. And I mentioned at the start that you start off with the Vampire Killer. But I actually, despite the fact that this is the third run that I did of Pumpkin Mode, I actually didn't know that you started off with the Vampire Killer until there's a very specific point. I think it's about halfway through this run when I finally realized that. So I'm going to be going through a lot of the game with the Flame of Whips on, which I think is going to be doing less damage to most enemies. Enemies that are weak to a certain element will take more damage from the elemental whip that corresponds to that weakness than they will to the Vampire Killer, but enemies with no specific elemental weaknesses take more damage from the Vampire Killer than from any of the elemental whips, so this run is actually going to be slightly suboptimal. But once I realized that was the case, I was like too far into the run and I really didn't want to stop. I thought to myself, alright, well if I die on the Forgotten one, then at least I can get better footage, but I didn't die on the Forgotten one. If you don't know what the Forgotten one is, you'll find out. It's kind of like the big hazard in these runs, even after you know what you're doing. It's funny. Whenever I do these Lament of Innocence videos, it never seems to take me too long to start talking about the Forgotten one, but I have to stop myself. One consequence, I will say, one consequence of Pumpkin Mode's lower starting max health is that I am going to go for some energy tanks that I think I skipped in the Leon mode. Just because it's more important to make sure you have at least to have higher health. Because you're much more likely to reach a dangerous threshold when you have so much less health. I realize that's a little bit obvious to say, but that's... Just wanted to make sure I explained completely what was going on. I also didn't bother getting... Usually when I uploaded my Leon mode footage, I went to the training rooms, which are available from the very start of the castle, just to kind of like show that they were there mostly. And I also, but that's also, the training rooms are also where you get your first relic, which is how you start making use of MP. I didn't bother doing that for this run because that relic is really just like not good. You kind of have to like be running into things to be doing any damage with it, and I didn't want to bother doing the training rooms. I figured it would be it just wouldn't be worth the time or the effort. And I'm also gonna go out of my way to get more MP as well, for the same reason. Well, not for the same reason, because MP increasing your maximum MP is more important on the little pumpkin guy than it is on Leon. I don't know, by the way, if you're curious about this, what like the origin of this joke is, because I had read about Pumpkin Mode a long time before I actually ever sat down and played Lament of Innocence. I was just like reading about the alternate modes in the series, and I always assumed that the pumpkin would make some appearance in the base game, but it doesn't. It's just like a thing that anomalously exists on the game disc, and fuck. Alright. So another thing that this is actually a good time to mention, which I've mentioned in the previous two videos, but in case you haven't seen them, I'll bring this up again, is that if something about my movement looks funny, it's because the movement is funny. It's not very funny to me, but it's funny as in it's strange. So I am playing this on emulator, as I've hopefully made very clear in all my videos, and I'm playing with a USB controller that's like, it's not like a real DualShock. It's supposed to replicate a DualShock, but it's a USB controller. So I'm playing with this like fake USB DualShock because I do have some real DualShock 2s from the PlayStation 2, but when I tried to use them with a USB adapter, the right analog stick for some reason just like wasn't registering half of its directions, which is a big problem in this game and would have been an even bigger problem if I were to try to do that in Curse of Darkness. But the trade-off is that the USB controller has a very over-responsive control stick, which means that I'm stuck basically on 8-way run. Now, I was able actually to... There are like analog stick settings you can change in PCSX2, as you would of course expect, but reducing the sensitivity of the control stick never seemed to increase its capacity for like turning radius. In fact, it usually just kind of like made it work even worse than before. So that's why my movement is weird and like jittery. It's because I'm basically playing on 8-way run instead of full analog movement. And that becomes a problem in the platforming sections because it means that there's now only so many directions I can jump off of a platform. And I have to sometimes do like weird double jump course corrections to go in the direction that I actually want to go, because I can't just go in any direction that I want. So that's going to become apparent. I don't quite think that's what went wrong in that earlier platforming section. I think I was just kind of too far forward on the platform and bonked my head. And then I just made a bunch of other mistakes. But that is going to become relevant in the later platforming areas. So I just wanted to clear that up. I think PCSX2 plays nicer with later controllers, like a DualShock 4 or something would probably work better, but I don't have one of those, so I'm just working with what I got. There are so many meth jokes I could make, I can't even pick one. I guess I could say what that's a reference to. So, if I'm remembering correctly, MF is actually a... Oh, what's this? Oh, right. So this slowdown happened because my fucking laptop, because I am actually playing this on a laptop. I know. I was suckered into buying a super powerful gaming laptop. And like the power cord came loose at one of its connection points. Like the cord connecting the outlet to like the little charger pack got loose, and when that happens, the laptop can like barely function. So that's what that was, in case you're curious. Yeah, the emeth thing. I think emeth is like a Hebrew or like Aramaic word or something. I don't know. Some ancient like Semitic language word, which was in the story of the golem, which I don't know if people even know this. A lot of people probably do, but just in case you don't, I'll bring it up, because there's not much to say about this boss fight. It's going to be over in a second anyway. So the golem is a fictional creature from... I don't know what like text it's from, but it's some like Jewish like folklore mythology thing. Basically, a guy created a being out of stone or out of mud by carving the word emeth into its body, which means life, I think, in whatever language that's a word for. So that's what that's a reference to. I also don't know if it's pronounced golem or golem. I feel like I've heard golem before, but whenever I hear golem, I think of Gollum from Lord of the Rings, and I've always said golem ever since I saw Golem in the Pokemon games, so I just say golem. Ooh. Fucking scintillating commentary here, Shovatar. Alright, so there's a merchant, as before. I'm prioritizing getting anti-status items because I don't really expect to be taking that much damage throughout most of the game. I feel like I didn't actually take a single hit during the entirety of the laboratory, which is only just occurring to me now. But that's kind of like... that's going to be emblematic of the rest of the run. I'm very rarely going to be in any actual danger. This is a good time actually to talk about this. Fuck. I bumped my fucking microphone. Sorry about that, I bumped my microphone and had to edit it out, so it's going to be a odd patch of silence there. Anyway, sub-weapons. This is a good time to talk about sub-weapons. So the Pumpkin Man here has only one sub-weapon, which is the Pumpkin Bomb, which is a very slow projectile that gets thrown in a spot, and then after a little bit it explodes, and then maybe it'll do some damage to whatever is still in that general area after the explosion, and maybe it won't. And as you perhaps may have gleaned from that little description there, it's almost completely useless, and it's totally redundant when you consider how much damage the Pumpkin Man's whip does to the excuse me, to the hordes of cannon fodder enemies in Lament of Innocence. It's really like excuse me. It's really pointless, and the red orb that you get from the golem boss unlocks a red pumpkin subweapon attack, which is just a bigger version of it, which doesn't solve any of its core problems, which is that number one, it doesn't really seem to do that much damage, and if it does, it definitely doesn't do more damage than the whip, and number two, it's slow, so it's not like you can... Like, in the time it takes for you to throw it, and then for it to land, and then for it to explode, you could have just whipped whatever it was you were fighting, and it would have been dead immediately. So it doesn't let you do anything new, rather. It doesn't... There's no reason to use it over the whip. So that's why it's not very good. It's not really until... I forget which subweapon actually becomes good. The pink orb that you get from the boss of the Garden Forgotten by Time, that one's pretty good. It's like homing missiles that actually increase your range of attack. And then, well, the really good one is going to be the Wind Pumpkin spell, which is a direct replication of the Wind Axe spell from the Leon mode, which lets you, like, dash forward, but I'm not going to get that until the end of the Palace of Waterfalls, so that's going to be a ways off. But until that point, I don't really think any of the other... I don't think any of the other sub-weapons that I'm going to get are going to be any good, which is a little bit disappointing. Because I remember thinking that maybe the Joe the Vampire, the protagonist of the game's first alternate mode, would have sub-weapons unlocked, or would have like more abilities unlocked with orbs from the bosses, and I was disappointed that that was not the case. So when I learned that Pumpkin Man here had his own special sub-weapon, and actually did get different spells unlocked, I was expecting that again, but unfortunately they're mostly completely useless, which is sad. I probably wouldn't... There actually is a route that I had... So the route that I'm taking through the game is the same route that I took on Leon, and it's mostly based around the fact that the first really good relic you can get in the game, the Black Bishop, is in the House of Sacred Remains, behind a locked door, and the key you get for that door is in the labs. And also because the lab gives you the Flame Whip, which doesn't matter as much on Pumpkin Man, because he has the Vampire Killer, but that was my rationale for doing it on Leon. But the Flame Whip is incidental, it's mostly just because of the Black Bishop. But if I wanted to, there is another route that I could have taken, which would have involved doing, I think, the Garden first, and then I think the Palace of Waterfalls second, or the Palace... No, that can't be right. No, it must have been the Ghostly Theater first, and then the Palace of Waterfalls second. Yeah, which would get me the wind, because... Oh no, that wouldn't work. No, it must have been... No, I was wrong twice. It was Waterfalls first, because the key in the garden, in the Palace of Waterfalls, isn't, like, locked behind anything. You can just go and get it. Although, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that would not be a good route, because there's a very good accessory in the Palace of Waterfalls called the Dropner, which increases all of your whip damage by like 20%, which I'm actually not going to get in this run because it's kind of a pain in the ass to get, and because it would make the footage drag on longer. In the save file that I did the boss rush on, I did bother going and getting it, because on the boss rush, if you're trying to fucking no damage the boss rush, then you want as much damage as you can possibly get. So... What the fuck was I saying? Oh yeah, I was talking about the green orb off of the boss in the Palace of Waterfalls. I guess if I really wanted to, if I was skipping the Dropner anyway, then I could have done the Palace of Waterfalls first, and then I guess maybe the Garden, and then gone from there. But if I don't, the longer I go without a relic to use, the more time I spend with like wasted MP and like basically a completely wasted resource. So I prioritized getting the Black Bishop over anything else. Maybe it would have been better to get the Wind Pumpkin spell that lets you zoom around faster. I don't know. It probably wouldn't have honestly made a difference if I just completely skipped getting any relics at all. It's just kind of the problem with relics in these games, which is that, number one, they're like a pain in the ass to actually utilize because it's very clunky, because it's like guard, activate, then you have to deactivate them once they're done doing whatever it is that they're doing, so that way you don't waste MP. And then in order to get more MP, you have to like wait for enemies to use certain attacks. It's very, very frustrating. So I guess it probably wouldn't have been the end of the world if I just pretended that relics didn't exist for pumpkin mode. But I felt like I should... they give me MP, they give me this resource, because the thing is that, like, the only reason I'm going out of my way to go through all of these side areas is to open the door that the Black Bishop is behind, which is what these, like, switches are for that I'm going to. So, if I did just skip getting the Black Bishop, and if I got something else, then I could have probably shaved, like, a good, I don't know, 15 minutes off of this game, off of this run's time, I suppose. How long is this taking? It's probably not taking 15 minutes, but it feels like it's taken a really long time to do all these rooms and clear out all this shit and hit all these switches. Because there's 2 different doors in the House of Sacred Remains that each require 3 switches. You have to hit one of them, you have to get one of them open in order to progress, but the other one just has the Black Bishop behind it? No, what's in the... Oh, no. No, the other door that requires 3 switches to open has a key that leads you to... lets you get an accessory in the Ghostly Theater, which reduces heart cost. So that's pretty important, actually. Because I'm not necessarily worried about being in a situation where, like, I use all 140 of my hearts in a boss fight. I just kind of don't want to worry about my heart supply at all, because regenerating hearts in Lament of Innocence is annoying and time-consuming. Because you have to, like, stop and whip torches every time you want some hearts, or, like, try to do an awkward, like, jump and whip and hope that your whip, like, barely catches one of them. In the classic 2D games, you could just jump and whip, and you would usually not lose that much. You wouldn't lose any forward... You wouldn't lose that much, like, forward speed. Because you could just carry the momentum forward, and it would be almost as fast in the jump. But in the 3D games, they made it more annoying to break torches. I suppose that was also kind of a problem with Castlevania 64 and Legacy of Darkness, but in those games it was annoying to regenerate your gem supply just because... Is that the first hit I've taken? I think that might be the first point of damage I've taken in this entire video. Is from that fucking hunchback. That's funny. Well, if anything was ever gonna hit me, it would have been those guys. I think my issue with combining the low health, high damage with just like the normal base game gameplay is that, like, you're not thinking about the game any differently, right? Because it's not like when you play the game normally, you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to take damage here on purpose because I know I can. That's a very rare situation. Shit like that happens in, like, speedruns, but in just, like, a regular playthrough of a game, you're never going to be in a position where you're always going to be trying to avoid taking damage. So it's not like you're playing any differently when you have less health, because in both situations you're trying to avoid taking damage. You just get punished harder in the one case, which isn't, like, I don't know. The thing is that, like, the combat in Lament of Innocence is already pretty brain dead, so I guess the Pumpkin Man doing so much more damage, making it go by faster, is... I don't know, I guess that's good, but it also makes it even more brain dead. Those fucking messages popping up at the top left of the screen are really annoying, and I forgot to turn them off during any of these recordings. There is an option to make those things not show up, but I just fucking forgot. I just fucking forgot. I think there's something... Because the thing is that, like, the pumpkin is supposed to just be a joke. But the thing is that it's a joke that goes on for an hour and a half. Or however long this video is going to end up being. I guess maybe like 2 hours. Because I'm not... It's probably going to end up being roughly as long as the Joe the Vampire video, because I'm not... Because in that video I was like skipping a lot of stuff that I'm going out of my way to do here. Because in that video I wasn't worried about keys or anything. So even though Pumpkin Man is doing... Or no, wait. Is that right? Or is that wrong? Maybe that's wrong. Because I did actually go out of my way a lot in the Joe video to get, like, angry... To get angry? To get attack and defense buffs. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me today. I had my morning coffee, so I thought I'd be okay to fucking form sentences, but apparently my brain is just picking random words out of the ether and inserting them into my mouth. Anyway, this video is going to be faster... Okay. This video, like the last alternate mode video, is going to be about 2 hours long. I'm guessing, because in both situations there's no cutscenes and I'm doing more damage. That's what I was trying to say. Because in theory, Joe the Vampire mode, you could skip... You could skip stuff that you maybe wouldn't skip on Leon, but in both cases you're basically incentivized with the same things, which is some kind of increase to your attack power. Because what they do is, like in Leon mode, like places that have relics or that have armor, sometimes in Joe the Vampire mode it's replaced by attack or defense buffs. That's what I'm trying to talk about. I'm not, I swear to God, I'm not, like, on anything. I'm just, like... I didn't really get that much sleep. But... Fuck it, I want to talk about Pumpkin Man. I want to talk about this little pumpkin dude and his little fucking gloves. It's actually really fucked up, because I was trying to, like... I've been trying to fix my sleep schedule and get it back to something a little bit more normal. But I ended up staying up super late in the for longer than I normally do, with the expectation that I would therefore sleep for a long time, because I'd been awake for a long time and my body would just make me sleep more. But instead, I was expecting to sleep for like over 10 hours at least. Or maybe like 12 or more, but instead I fucking woke up like 6 hours after I went to sleep. And then I started thinking about Curse of Darkness. And the thing about me is that once my brain starts like working on stuff, it's very hard to get it to stop. So I'm just sitting there in bed and I'm like trying to get back to sleep, and instead I'm thinking like, I should try to get like do I need to get a Gen 2 Corpsey? Or I should just try to get like a first generation Corpsey to get Bone Storm by the time I get to the Skeleton Diver, and then I can probably just like coast off of that. I probably don't need a second one, since Devil Shards only produce a second generation with higher 10%, blah blah blah. And like, once my brain is forming thoughts like, I want to make sure I can get a Corpsey with Bone Storm by the time I reach the Skeleton Diver, I'm awake. Like once I'm thinking that, I'm now awake, and there's nothing I can fucking do about it. So I just decided I would bite the bullet and get the fuck out of bed and start doing things. So that's why I'm here. And if you're curious what anything I just said means, it has to do with Curse of Darkness. So when the Curse of Darkness videos get posted, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Curse of Darkness instead of this because this is like a fucking rough stretch of the game to talk about because the combat in Lament of Innocence is like really samey and really not very engaging, and because like the House of Sacred Remains, I've said this so many times already, but I'm going to say it again, the levels in Lament of Innocence are beautiful and extremely repetitive. The environments are gorgeous, but you see basically the same thing over and over and over again. I did actually see a painting of a man with a turban back there that I'd never seen before, but other than that, it's like... oh my god. How much gorgeously crafted Gothic architecture can I withstand before I cry out, enough? Enough, I've had enough. Please, extremely spectacularly talented environment designers, stop making things interesting. I will eat my words a little bit with the House of Sacred Remains in particular, because the basement looks very, very different. As you can see, there's cobwebs everywhere, or spider webs, I suppose. Although you never see the spiders that make them, which begs the question of how they got there. Maybe there's a theory about that, about where the spiders that spin the webs are. Maybe they're on the ceiling, because you don't usually look at the ceiling. Anyway, the reason why the House of Sacred Remains also is, like, takes so long is because I'm going out of my way to get the key. I think this is what I'm gonna go do now, actually, yeah. The key to get the heart, the accessory that reduces heart costs in the Ghostly Theater. So, if I really just gave, like, no shits at all about like trying to like make my character powerful, my little pumpkin character, then this would probably be going a lot faster, but it would also be riskier. Because oh no. Now I remember. Okay. So the reason why the heart accessory is really important, it has to do with the fucking Forgotten One again. Everything in these games always comes back to the Forgotten One. Because the pumpkin, the lightning pumpkin subweapon ability that you get from the lightning orb that drops off the succubus in the Ghostly Theater is really good. It's like if you ever played Aria of Sorrow, or what other game has this? Well, the Richter had cross item crashes in Rondo and DX. So it's the Julius Belmont Grand Cross thing, where he hovers up in the air and like holy light emits from him and does a bunch of AoE damage around everything. And that's really good for Phase 1 of the Forgotten One, but the problem is that it's really expensive heart-wise. Like, they gave the pumpkin more hearts, but they also made his sub-weapons cost more hearts, so I need the heart reduction accessory to make sure that I'll have enough hearts to both use that as much as I want to against Phase 1 of the Forgotten One, and then also have enough hearts to like dash around during Phase 3 with the Wind Pumpkin spell. So now I remember what this is all for. And I'm very surprised I'm going for this, because this way it takes you to the Blood Cape, which is an accessory that increases... basically, if you take damage, it won't prevent the damage, but it'll also give you some hearts. So it's kind of like it's a nice little incidental thing to have, and I'm surprised that I'm getting it. I think I'm only getting it because on these runs where I don't get the Dropnir and where I don't get the Aroma Earring, which are the two like flat damage buff accessories, I'm kind of like out of accessories to use. And you can use up to 3 of them. So I want to make sure I was using all 3 slots. I have 2 right now because you don't get the 3rd one until you get a thing in the garden. And the garden is going to be the last level I do in this route. This route is identical to the route that I took on Leon. I may have already said that. And I guess I just needed the 3rd thing to put in the accessory slot if I wasn't going to get either of the good ones. And maybe it's fucked up for me to be like talking about these really good accessories without showing them to you, but the game's not really like... The game's not hard enough to make it necessary, especially on Pumpkin Man. Pumpkin Man, like, I'm worried about the Forgotten One, but the Forgotten One is also going to die, like, super fast. And that might sound contradictory, but it's because the Forgotten One can do a lot of damage too. Like, he can probably fucking two-shot this guy when I go and fight him. And plus, having the Bloody Cape on is just like one more way to not have to farm, to never have to worry about my heart supply, because now every time I take a point of damage, I'll get some hearts back. Anything to keep the pace up, anything to make it so that I'm not like awkwardly jumping and whipping at torches. Let's see how this undead parasite fight goes. This is actually another fight that's really scary because I can just randomly take damage, and I don't have that much health to take that damage. So this is actually probably another fight that's kind of scary, and for some weird reason, is this going... I'm probably killing these eyeballs faster than I did on Leon, although I don't know how much faster. Because something about these eyeballs have like weird health properties. Because when I played Joe the Vampire mode, they had like more health than they were supposed to have. But this part will probably go by pretty fast. I throw a big pumpkin here purely because whenever you stand in the middle to try to hit that thing when it first shows up, the worm man will always either breathe fire at you, forcing you to run away, or he'll like zoom out from the side of the screen where you can't fucking see him, and he'll blindside you and hit you. So that first, when the thing first, it always pops up in the middle first, but it's also kind of like a trap, because if you try to actually hit it there, you'll take damage from the worm. So that was a no damage. Which, alright, good enough. I mean, it doesn't really like... It's not like I played particularly well. He just never hit me when I wasn't expecting him to. He just happened to not choose the places where I was standing, which is why this fight fucking sucks. Oh no, this is embarrassing. Alright, there we go. And this is like the counterintuitive thing about Pumpkin Mode, which is that you have less health, so you'd think it would be scarier, but you kill everything so fast that it like it's like overtuned or like undertuned or something. But I guess they couldn't. I guess if they made him any more vulnerable, it would become too hard, and they couldn't nerf his damage, or else the thing that's supposed to distinguish him from Leon would be obscured. So I don't know. I also I have to say, not a big fan of the constant running sound effect that always accompanies the pumpkin's footsteps. It's kind of like Pumpkin Mode as a whole, where it's a joke that goes on for too long. It's funny at first, but when you play 2 hours of this and you have to hear that sound every time you move through the video game world, it grates on you very quickly. And also I should explain the reason I'm not getting the Dropnir or the Aroma Earring is because the Ghostly Theater level that I'm going into now has two halves, the right half and the left half. The left half gives you the Aroma Earring, which increases sub-weapon damage, and gives you the key that lets you get the Dropnir in the Palace of Waterfalls, which increases your whip damage. So in a normal game run, you would absolutely want to do that, but you don't actually ever have to go to the left half of the Ghostly Theater to beat the game. So I only do the right half just for the sake of the footage. There was a period of time where I was, like, concerned about 100% map completion in these YouTube videos. Or just, like, or just like when playing the game in general, and it was really not a good idea. It just made a lot of games that I think I would have had more fun playing, less fun to play and collect footage for, because you have to like constantly check the map screen to make sure you got all the little squares. That was the problem with Portrait of Ruin. Although with Portrait of Ruin I did map completion because you have to get a certain percentage of map completion in Portrait of Ruin to get the optional, to get like to an optional zone, but the optional zone sucked anyway, so so what I'm getting at is that with these later games, pretty much starting with well, with Dawn of Sorrow I kind of did this, but Dawn of Sorrow was a different situation. What I'm laboriously trying to explain is that I became less concerned with 100% map completion for these videos, because all that really ends up being, like, it sounds good in the YouTube video title, because it's like 100% complete, like a full run, but then the way that it plays out in actuality is a bunch of fucking boring-ass footage where you're just wandering around in irrelevant areas, doing nothing, and wasting a bunch of time. So with these games, I just prioritize like boss fights, because those are actually cool and interesting and interactive, and I think we're coming up on a break here. This was actually a mistake, but I'm going to talk more about that later. Actually, I'm going to talk about it right now. The reason I said that was a mistake in reference to that little cut right there is because that was the first... wow. Because that was the first break in the footage. The way that I collect this footage and then do commentary for it is, if it's a long game, like Lament of Innocence, I'll collect the footage in like roughly hour-long chunks, and then go back and do commentary for them like one at a time. Like if you listen to any of my really long commentaries, there will be points where the sound, like the my voice will like change. Like it usually like if my voice is all worn out, 54 minutes in, suddenly I like go to a save station and there's like a little like awkward bit of silence, and then I'm back and I sound different. That's because I record these in like multiple sessions, because I can't really talk for much longer than 45 minutes to an hour at a time, or else I start losing my voice. So the reason that's what that cut was for. It was to stop the footage and then collect a second chunk. The reason that was a mistake is because this footage and this run in total ended up being, I think, a little bit under 1 hour. I think it's literally 1 hour and 59 minutes. But that first chunk was only about 45 minutes of gameplay. And so then I collected a second chunk that ended up being about which ended up being like 50-something minutes. And then the last chunk of footage that I recorded was like 20 minutes, which is a weird duration for one of these videos. What I should have done is I should have not done that cut until, I guess, maybe right before the succubus, or like right after the succubus. Probably right after the succubus, and then that chunk would have been like about an hour, and then the rest of the game would have been about an hour. But I underestimated how long the second half of the game would take. So I thought it would be about 90 minutes in total, which is why I stopped at 45. Like the first cut at 45 minutes, but it ended up being longer. Usually I don't make mistakes like that, but here I did. Oh well. It's not really a mistake that's relevant at all to you, the viewer, or to your viewing experience. It's a mistake in reference to me and my recording commentary experience. Anyway, here we are in the theater with the pumpkin. The pumpkin in the theater with the whip. To structure the situation in the form of like a Clue the board game villain. There's going to be a platforming section coming up here, like a dark platforming section coming up here that's going to, I think it's going to suck. The second half of the game takes a long time because it's like, so I love the Forgotten One. The Forgotten One is like my favorite boss fight in this game. It's one of the best parts of the game in my opinion. But the way that you fight it is very annoying, because you have to go all the way through the last level of the game, then you have to walk all the way back to the start of the castle, then go all the way back through You basically have to do the last level twice, which is annoying. Because... Well, I shouldn't have to explain why that's annoying. It's annoying to have to do the same thing twice. The contrast between this game and Curse of Darkness in terms of, like, how the camera behaves and how it feels to play is really, really startling. The game could probably also do without rooms like these. I feel like... Although, that's kind of the whole, like, issue with Lament of Innocence, is that everything is kind of like a, like... I forgot. Okay. Wow. Alright, well that's gonna clip my fucking audio. I forgot what that did. So that's... I'm finally using the sub-weapon now, because now it actually, like, does some damage. I forgot that it did that. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is the part that sucks. This is where that 8-way run that I was talking about becomes an issue, but I guess I fucking get the blind... Get to the door that's shrouded in darkness on, like, my first attempt, so what do I know? Okay, this was actually... So what the Brisingame does there, you probably only saw it for a second, is that it decreases the rate at which relics, sap your MP. And with that, and that's like, it can be kind of like incidental. I think it still basically is incidental, but for the value that it has is increased by the fact that the Pumpkin Man has so much less MP than Leon does. So that MP is like extra valuable. That's actually really, really important for the boss rush, where I need to use, I don't need to, but where I want to use the Invincible Jar to deal with some of the more dangerous attacks that the bosses in that game can dish out. So in this footage here, it's more of like a convenience thing, kind of like relics in general. In the boss rush, it's extremely important to make sure that I have that on. So that's the only reason why I would bother. I mean, the blind section, the platforming section when I was just jumping into darkness is apparently going a lot better than the part where I just jump in a hole and die over and over again, but normally I wouldn't do it unless there was a really important benefit to doing it, and here there is. I think I was planning on, like... I think I was maybe planning on cutting this out at some point. Like, that was my thought process when I got into those rooms, was if I, like, fall in a hole and die over and over again, I'll just cut it out in the editing, but it never really ended up... I never really ended up doing that. Because it would be weird for the footage to have, like, an awkward... Like, jump cut when I'm suddenly at the start of the room and then, like, what? I'm suddenly at the end of the room? That would look weird. I guess I could have... Because that's how it would have to be structured. I would have to cut out all my, like, failed attempts, and that might be... Because the thing is that the software that I use to do a lot of, like, the basic video editing stuff doesn't play very nice when it comes to cutting footage out, because it only really... It wants footage to end on a keyframe every time. So if the footage didn't work out to where... I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. Basically, the long story is that I didn't end up doing it, so there's lots of footage of me falling in holes and dying in this Lament of Innocence footage. But that's okay. That's okay. Potions. Look at those couches. I forgot to mention the couches. Yes, the Ghostly Theater has these, like, fucking couches in them that look like they could be from, like, IKEA today. Now, I'm not a historian. I don't know very much about the 11th century, but I feel like... I don't know. How old are couches? When were couches invented? You know what I mean? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Maybe it's like a Castlevania 64 situation where Dracula is using future technology to make stuff to have stuff before he's supposed to have it. So I want to point this out too. You'll notice that when she split into 3 versions of herself there, the camera kind of angled over to the right. That's because that's how you tell which one is her during the attack. The camera will kind of follow the one that's really her. But depending on the angle she's at and the angle you're at, that like may or may not be apparent when the camera does that. So that's... There it was very simple because they were all like right in front of me with a wall behind them, so the camera just had to like swerve over to one side, but it can be more complicated than that. Fighting the succubus on the pumpkin is a lot better than fighting her on Leon because her vulnerability windows are more scarce and the pumpkin can just take advantage of them better by doing more damage during them. That might all sound obvious, but I mentioned it for the succubus specifically because how much damage you do can be more or less important depending on the boss fight. Like on the golem, it doesn't really matter because the golem's not difficult. On the succubus, it matters because you finish it because her invulnerability windows are very valuable, and hard to come by. I was very surprised that the pumpkin mode involved like Ronaldo's shop and everything, because I was worried about like, well, I wasn't worried. I'm like, are they really gonna have like him like selling stuff to this weird pumpkin thing? And the answer is yes. And I actually hoped for a moment after I noticed that, I like in my heart of hearts, I was hoping that they also like redid the cutscenes with the pumpkin instead of Leon, where it would be like the cutscenes would play out with the pumpkin in place of Leon, and then instead of the pumpkin saying anything, it would just be Ronaldo talking, and he would just be responding to nothing. But that would probably be a lot of work to actually do. That would have been fucking hilarious if they did it, but... like I just said, that'd probably be pretty hard. It'd be worth it, though. I think this game would go from mid-tier to high-tier if it had a comedic masterpiece in it like that. But it would also inflate the... I want to say runtime, but runtime is for movies. It would inflate the length of the run past what I would like it to be. No, it'd probably still be worth it. So this is the most egregious example of the consequences of me forgetting that I have the vampire killer. Because the fishmen in this stage are resistant to fire and ice, which are usually the two, like, whip elemental types that I'll have out during this stage. I usually just have fire out by default, and it's helpful for that room back there with the frost demon and the frost blades. And then I'll put the whip of ice on for... oh, and I want the whip of flames for the ice elemental boss, and then I'll put the whip of ice on for the final boss of the level, but neither of those flames are good against the fishmen. It's only the lightning whip that does extra damage to them. Not that it's terribly relevant. I hate this part, by the way. I don't think I really... I don't know if I even, like, explained what's going on here. I guess it's kind of obvious. You bait this guy over here to, like, break the wall with one of his attacks, but there are two problems. Problem number one is you can't see what he's doing. You can kind of hear the ball and chain wind up, which is why I'm still able to react to it, but you can't see what he's doing. Number two, sometimes he takes a very long time to get close enough to that door to actually break it. Number three, he doesn't always do the attack where he throws the ball and chain in like a straight line towards you. Sometimes he'll spin around in the circle, which ends up with him like just smacking into the wall and making a bunch of obnoxious noise that does not succeed in destroying the wall or opening up the pathway that you want. So it's kind of it's any situation in video games where you're just like waiting for the AI to do something is very frustrating, and that's a prime example of that. First try? First try. Man, that is so lucky. Both in this footage and in the Leon footage, I did that whole platforming section first try, when usually in like my practice runs, I was so god-awful at it. It would take me like, I would fall off one of those ledges like half a dozen times, at least, before finally making it here. The Frost Elemental is actually similar, it's very similar to the Succubus, because of the fact that it's harder to get it, to catch it in like a point in time when it'll take hit stun and you can get a full combo in. Usually, because that's like when the difference between when a boss can be safely attacked or not, in my definition, is whether you can get in a full combo, whether they're getting hit stunned. And with the Frost Elemental, she's only really vulnerable to be staggered when she's like floating around in the middle of the arena on her way to do her next attack, or right after whatever attack she just pulled off. And depending on some of the attacks, it's safe to try to hit her after some of the attacks, but then with some of the other attacks, it's hard to get in position to hit her right before it finishes. So because her vulnerability windows are so rare, once again, the fact that the pumpkin does so much more damage means that, or rather I should say the pumpkin's extra damage is extra valuable. I'm very curious to see what happens here. Because as I believe I said at the start of the footage, the fact that the pumpkin starts off with so little health and MP means that the energy tanks and the MP increases that you can get are more important. And you can get a MP increase if you collect all the money in this little disc ride, and I think that's what's going to happen. It took me a while to figure this out, but the pattern for the money being available is actually very simple. The coins will be on the left, and then they'll be on the right, and then they'll be on the left, and then they'll be on the right, like that. So that's all you have to remember. You don't have to really memorize... Fuck, I missed some. You don't have to memorize, like, any weird positioning. You just have to go right, left, or left, right, left, right, left, right, and then be standing in the middle of the platform to be ready to collect the reward when it comes up. One of those, there's two of those little disc rides in this level. One of them gives you a relic that I think heals you, and the other one gives you an MP capacity expansion module. And I want to say I think I did get the MP one in this run. I think I did. I could be wrong. Normally I just run past that guy and I like to just run through this room in general, but I think I was just annoyed that that guy hit me, and so I decided that I would try to kill him out of spite. Really, I was only like punishing myself by wasting all that time. Oh no, maybe it was because I wanted to get to the door here, but I could have just walked past him. I don't know. There it is, Grand Pumpkin. I would say probably his best subweapon. I actually don't really know. I actually don't know what the white orb plus pumpkin subweapon does. I forget. And then the black orb plus pumpkin subweapon does something that I think is kind of overpowered, but I don't remember what it is exactly. I was never super curious about the pumpkin's subweapons, which perhaps I should have been. I was just happy once I learned that he could get the same like dash attack that Leon can get with Wind Axe. I was kind of like, okay, that's the one question that I had that was answered. But Grand Pumpkin is interesting because it's good because it's like AoE damage around your body, but the problem is that it doesn't give you any iframes at all. Maybe it gives you like a few at the very beginning, but you're not invulnerable while you're doing Grand Pumpkin. You can get knocked right out of it, as I learned during the Joe the Vampire fight that's coming up at the end of this level. When I was practicing that for the boss rush footage that I'm going to post, I discovered that you do not have iframes during Grand Pumpkin. I think the idea is that the pumpkin swirling all around you would stop enemies from hitting you, so maybe iframes would be redundant, but that's just not how it plays out in practice in a lot of situations. Especially on the Joe the Vampire fight, because he's constantly throwing projectiles at you. Or like summoning shit under your feet, that kind of thing. It's pretty sick damage, though. That was really strange because he missed like 5 or 6 times in a row and didn't seem to be getting any closer than me, but then he randomly hit me. I don't know why. Maybe he was slowly getting closer to me and I just couldn't tell because of the perspective. That's possible. Yeah, now I'm actually using my hearts because number one, I actually have good sub-weapons, and number two, there's a heart expansion coming up pretty soon, and in this game, picking up heart expansions replenish all your hearts, so now I can really go bonkers. I believe there's an energy tank back up north that I could have gotten, but I didn't bother, because it's through a pretty annoying hallway that's full of swinging blades, and then I think a room full of enemies that you have to kill in order to progress, so I just didn't really feel like it. I'd already made one digression to get an energy tank that I usually don't. There, I didn't feel like doing a second one. Doppelganger fight. Not really any different. It's funny that they don't make you fight a pumpkin doppelganger. Maybe that would be like too scary because he would do too much damage. And this is a situation where I really wish I remembered that I had the vampire killer, but I've just forgotten completely. It's because the doppelganger is not weak to fire. The fact that I have the whip of flames on here is purely is just a pure mistake. See, this is why his lower health doesn't matter, because the higher damage just overcompensates for it. That was what, like 4 combos to kill the doppelganger? 4 or maybe like 5? And that's without the vampire killer on. If I had the vampire killer on, that might have been even faster. This music is a remix of something, but I can't remember what. Like something about that motif, that refrain that it was doing a second ago, seemed familiar to me. Speaking of music and speaking of sound, there's this recurring issue that I've noticed with my footage that I've collected. When I go through and I do the commentated versions, I'll record myself talking, and then I'll put that in, and then I'll have to quiet down the game sound in order to compensate, except for cutscenes when there's voice acting. But the problem is, and my goal there is to make it so that the game is never so loud that I'm not clearly audible. Because that's the whole point of a commentary video, is if you do want to hear me talk. If you don't, you can just watch the uncommented version. Anyway, and so what I'll do is I'll look. I don't like quiet the game down in individual segments. I just sort of quiet it down all at once. So I'll go to like the loudest part of the game, and then quiet the entire game audio. Quiet all the game audio to the point that I can still be heard during that part. Which, the reason that's a problem is because in these games, typically sound effects are much louder than the music. So what I'm doing is I'm like fucking with the game audio, with the game footage audio, because the sound effects are too loud, but in the process, when there's not a bunch of like loud exploding sound effects happening, it's like too quiet. And the problem is that with these games, the sound effects come from combat. Combat is very common. If I wanted to go through and like only quiet down the parts where combat is happening and leave everything else untouched, that would take a really fucking long time to do, especially if it's like fucking 2 hours of footage or 3 hours of footage like Lament of Innocence. So I think the problem is just that the sound effects are too loud in the game itself, so maybe I'll fuck with the sound effects volume level and like in my Curse of Darkness footage, I don't know. Yes, I still haven't collected the Curse of Darkness footage, even as I'm doing the commentary for this video. I'm really... It's getting down to the wire, but it's not my fault. Curse of Darkness is a very complicated game. It's much more complicated than Lament of Innocence. And it took me a while to figure out what the optimal playstyle would be for that. Lament of Innocence, you do not have to think very hard. I will say that much. The only impactful decision you have to make is which sub-weapon to use if you're on Leon, and that was very easy for me. Because I just really didn't believe that there would be anything better than the axe. What the fuck? Oh, okay. Even I got confused there. Yeah, this game is very disorienting. Like, things like this, the camera being, like, you running towards the camera, giving you these weird angles, and then the map screen being... It's much clearer in, in Curse of Darkness. I guess I assumed that you started off with the Whip of Alchemy and that you didn't get the Vampire Killer until the point where you would get it in the main story. That's why I keep bringing that up, because as I'm watching this footage, all I can think every time I'm fighting anything is I don't know that I have the Vampire Killer. I don't know that I have the Vampire Killer. And it took a considerable exertion of will on my part not to just re-record the entire run with the Vampire Killer on the whole time. And the reason I didn't do that is because I knew I was kind of like lagging behind on my personal schedule, which might only mean anything to me, but I do want to like keep at a certain pace. And I just didn't feel like re-recording the whole thing. So I needed to get onto Curse of Darkness. Yeah, there's the heart expansion. Now I have all the hearts I need to fight Joe the Vampire in his little vampire prison cell. Would you call this a sewer level? It's right there in the inventory. I opened the inventory, I just don't see it. I don't see that it says Vampire Killer. Even though I'm looking right at it. Ugh, whatever. I probably could have skipped this. I probably could have just not done this at all, but... Because it really is not any that different. It's not different in any significant way, in my opinion, from the base game. And this is like one of the consequences of this style of gameplay and this style of combat, is that in a game like Dracula's Curse, for example, if you were to go into Dracula's Curse and give the player a completely new set of sub-weapons, that would completely change the game. The entire game would be I cannot overstate how important of a difference that would be in a game like Dracula's Curse, or even Castlevania 1, or like Rondo to a certain extent. Dracula X, all like the classic Castlevania games where combat was much more like measured and precise and calculated, and you know, every individual enemy was important. Or I mean, I'm slightly overstating the case here, but where enemy enemy placement was very important, number of enemies was very important, sub-weapons are very important. In Lament of Innocence, like, the pumpkin has different sub-weapons, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, it it doesn't make a difference. I think that was the exact moment when I realized I had the vampire killer. Was at that point as I'm opening up the whip inventory screen, but maybe not. I think I did notice at that point because I swapped back to the vampire killer instead of the whip of flames. So at least I'll have the vampire killer on for the garden, but I missed out on the opportunity to use it for the last 4 levels. Oh well.
Welcome back. What would you like today? Is that all? What would you like today? Is this? Yes, certainly. Is this? Yes, certainly. Anything else?
I mentioned this in my main game footage, but I'll mention it again. The armor that you can get from Ronaldo becomes available depending on percentage of map completion. So the fact that I'm skipping out on a lot of the fact that I'm skipping a lot of rooms in these levels means that I'm not always going to have access to the next tier of armor just because I finished a level. The pumpkin having different sub-weapons, like, could matter if they didn't give him, like, this like dashing sub-weapon was very important for the Forgotten One fight and the Grim Reaper fight to a certain extent. And then Grand Pumpkin was really important for the Forgotten One. If you didn't have those sub-weapons, then that would probably make a difference, but the difference would be that he would be less fun to play because he wouldn't have important tools that Leon has. I'm going to be really generous with this pumpkin dash ability, by the way, because there's a heart expansion that I can get before the lightning elemental boss, which is the next boss I'm going to fight, and then there's going to be actually, that's the only hard expansion that's in the level, is before the Thunder Elemental, but it's there, and I'm gonna get it. And the reason that I don't know exactly why I keep on going diagonally when I do like the pumpkin dash. It's happened a couple times now. It must have some, because I'm not like tilting the control stick to one side or the other. Like I'm holding straight, but then it goes off to one side, and I don't know why it does that. I'm guessing it must have something to do with like the perspective in the hallway in the room. I don't know. Yeah, this is a room that I never stepped foot in on Leon. I'm doing it on Pumpkin Man because there's an energy tank down here. If you're wondering what this room is for, you have to go through this room to hit a switch that opens a door that's available at the start of the level, behind which is a what is in there? I think it's a ring of, like, thunder resistance, or, like, fire resistance or something for Leon, and then for Joe it's an MP expansion. I don't need any, like, elemental resistance rings. My strategy for bosses is to not get hit. Not to get hit and then take less damage. If there was some boss that was like really dangerous and did fire damage, and I knew that the ring would be a difference maker, then maybe. Actually, I may have just described Phase 3 of the Forgotten One. Because the Forgotten One in Phase 3, and if you don't know what the Forgotten One is, I like keep mentioning it, you're gonna see it. Like, it's a big demon boss. It's the hardest boss in the game. It's like a secret boss in the basement. And there's a very dangerous attack he does in Phase 3 where he'll breathe like a laser beam at you. If that does fire damage, then I guess maybe it would be worth getting a ring to protect yourself from that, because if you get hit by that, it does like a lot of damage. I feel like it would maybe one-shot the pumpkin. I don't know. But my plan for that attack in this footage was just like, don't get hit by it, idiot. that was the idea. And the Forgotten One is also a boss where the pumpkin's higher damage is very relevant, because you can get out of the phases faster, which is really important for Phase 2. and plus the fight's just over faster. And with that boss fight, this is true every boss fight to a certain extent, but I think it's especially true for the Forgotten one. Every second that goes by on that fight is another second where some situation can eventuate, which puts you in a really shitty position. I wonder what I feel like speedrunners in this game, they must do the waterfall first, because they must want to get access to this ability like as quickly as possible. I don't know. I haven't learned anything about. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You get no iframes during that attack, and so if you're fighting enemies like these knights who don't get staggered, except by heavy attacks, and you try to use Grand Pumpkin, then they'll just hit you. Unless you kill them during the attack, of course. In Crazy Mode, the knights don't get staggered by anything. But you can't play Pumpkin Man on Crazy Mode, because Crazy Mode is accessible via the name screen. I think I already said that. Whatever. Yeah, this is like... I was just in this exact room, and I've been in this room like 3 times now. I don't know, I don't want to talk a bunch of shit about the sameness of the levels, because the levels themselves are really cool, but like... what were they thinking? This is kind of like the eternal... the eternal caveat of like video game criticism is that video games, it's kind of like movies too. I guess mostly just I could say mostly video games and movies. Like, they're so hard to make. Like, any video game, even a video game like this, like all you ever hear about in video game development is like crunch time and like people like overworking themselves, just these like fields of human misery to create these games, and then when it comes out, it's like it could be good or it could be bad. Do you know what I mean? People could work really, really hard on a game and the game could be garbage. People could work really, really hard on a game and the game could turn out well. Both things I think are capable of happening, because, you know, especially nowadays, because every game now that has like elaborate 3D animation, which is like a lot of like AAA games, that like 3D animation is hard work by definition. Like, animation in general is just really fucking hard. So those games all had even like 25-hour cutscene movie games had people who were working really hard on it. What the fuck point was I making? Oh yeah, the point that I was gonna make is that I feel bad when I really shit talk certain games, partially because I know that like there are people out there, probably even people who are going to be watching these videos who are going to really disagree with me in terms of my opinion about certain games. Just because, I don't know, I don't like to... I mean, I'm not going to moderate my opinion just because I think someone out there might disagree with me, but I know people can get, like, very defensive about these things, and I'm not setting out to upset anybody. I just want to be honest about how I feel about things. But also it's because, you know, if I talk a bunch of shit about a game, I have to remember that I'm talking a bunch of shit about something that a lot of people worked really hard on. Which, you know, the thing is that that's true, but that can't be a shield for all criticism, you know what I mean? Because if the fact that people worked really hard on something meant that you couldn't say it was bad, then every video game ever made would be considered good, and then the designation wouldn't mean anything. And that's the same reason why, even if it's like really harsh, I do try to be honest about how I feel about things in these games, because I think with a lot of... I don't want to like speak in general negativities, but I feel like a lot of people on YouTube who... Not just on YouTube, honestly. This is a problem that's older than YouTube. This is also true of like print reviews of video games to a certain extent, online publications. This happens a lot with video games where people will just say every game is good. Or they'll say like... Or they'll have very like general, like vague, positive things to say about a game, where they're like, be excited about every game they talk about in equal measure, and that's all very suspicious to me. A person on YouTube who, I mean, to a certain extent, I get it, depending on the situation, because if you were a YouTube person, say, and rather than setting out with like an arbitrary goal like me of like play every Castlevania game except for Vampire Killer and Haunted Castle, then you will naturally encounter in the course of that arbitrary goal, like things you like and things you don't like. But if I were to take a different approach and only make videos about games that I like, then yeah, everything I ever talked about in relation to the video games would be positive. And I guess it's possible that a lot of the people on YouTube who make videos like that, where they just like kind of blandly praise everything, are only talking about games they like. But when you have an overlap of like people who cover every new game that comes out, and then it just so happens that every new game that comes out they have a positive opinion of, there's a word for a person like that, and the word is shill. And I don't want to sound like an asshole, but like, it's just true. People who make YouTube channels, because this happens now. This didn't happen back in the mid-2000s when YouTube started. But people who make, like, there are people who will make YouTube channels now because they're hoping to like springboard it into a larger career with like the industry, right? And because the thing is, and I don't know how often people talk about this, like a lot of Let's Players, like the very big names, like they will get paid to play games. That's not like a conspiracy theory. That's not like a fringe belief. That's a proven fact that big YouTubers get paid money to play certain games. And it's very difficult to impossible to express and so the reason that's important is because if you're like a company, if you're a game corporation and you're looking for people to advertise your shit, and you have channel A and channel B, right? And let's say that channel A is like a human being with tastes. So they'll say there are some things they really like, some things they really don't like, some things they're like lukewarm on, and then you have channel B, where a guy just like blandly praises every single game he comes across. If you're a video game corporation, which of those two guys do you want to hire to play your game? You would want the guy who can be relied upon to give just a positive blanket recommendation to whatever game he plays, right? So I think there are people who will make YouTube channels where they just kind of say every game is good because they're hoping that it's something that they'll be able to turn into a larger career, right? I think it's very, very important to note that when YouTube started out in 2005, the most popular YouTube channels were channels where people were talking about games that sucked, like the Angry Video Game Nerd and all of the infinite numbers of people that the Angry Video Game Nerd inspired. These were people who were talking about games and talking about why games were bad. They were angry video game nerds. Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's funny. It's funny to hear someone criticize a game in a certain vein. And yes, like, these people were playing comedic characters for the most part, but it's like when YouTube was just like a weird thing on the internet that did not have any credible connection to larger professional and like ambitions, what people gravitated towards was talking about games that sucked and expressing their gripes and their grievances. But now that YouTube is increasingly becoming just another media outlet, no different from like the television, now you get the opposite, where you have a whole bunch of people trying to be the next, I don't know, what's a good example? Be the next Markiplier or something. And just trying to make themselves as bland and inoffensive and marketable as possible. Not like directly marketable, but as like exuding this aura of I am agreeable, I am cooperative, I can be relied upon to play your game and say your game is good no matter what. And I'm not trying to like talk shit about Markiplier or anything. I honestly, I used to actually watch Markiplier a long time ago, back when he was like, I shouldn't say like relatively unknown, but like a lot less known than he is now, which that's a very wide range. So I'm not saying like he's a soulless shill or anything, but I'm just saying that like people who achieve a certain level of success on YouTube become targets for corporate cooperation. That's all I'm saying. And part of being a good part of the media machine that gets involved with the industry is basically advertising products in whatever way you can. And I'll tell you something else too. I'm just going to say this, and I'm not going to get too into this, but people who make YouTube videos... Maybe I shouldn't even talk about this. Fuck it. I'm just going to say this too, even though this is like... I don't know. Maybe this will make people mad, maybe not. But all those people who make YouTube videos about like, this latest game is woke trash, and they make like fucking 50,000 videos all about like how games are woke, or some new game is woke, or some game dev is woke. Let me let you guys in on something. Those people are shills too. Okay? Even if they're not like literally being directly paid, even if they're not like shills in the literal sense of like they're responding to emails from these corporations and like doing what they what the PR department tells them to do, they are still serving the same function as a shill, because they're just vomiting up a bunch of crap about whatever the latest like fucking AAA game is and getting it all over YouTube. Even if it's a video about how a game is quote unquote woke trash, that video is an advertisement, because it is boosting awareness and attention to that particular product, okay? And it's also feeding into a narrative that the people who are making the game probably would like to encourage. The narrative being that their game is a progressive political statement, and that's proven because you have these people on the internet who are angry about it, who are reactionary. I'm trying to find a neutral way to phrase this. Like anti-progressive types. So those are ads too. Those are advertisements. Okay? Anybody who makes YouTube videos about like fucking video games and politics needs to like get their fucking heads checked. It's so fucking annoying, dude. And I'm not going to get any more into it than that, because this is like a whole thing, and I just want to... I don't want to be hypocritical. I said I had almost nothing to say about the Garden Forgotten by Time, because there was almost nothing to say that I haven't already said. I guess I will mention that the Medusa fight that happened like way back there while I was in the middle of my little diatribe, it's tougher on the Pumpkin Man because it's harder to... What I did when I fought the Medusa on Leon for the boss rush was I took advantage of a particular sub-weapon, the Axe Tornado, that didn't take very much time to set up, and that could like always do damage to Medusa and leave me free to move. I couldn't really find a good equivalent to that with the pumpkin, which is why I was like throwing a few sub-weapons at her in first and then eventually just kind of randomly attacking her, because that's sort of what you have to do. The Medusa is similar to the Succubus and the Frost Elemental in that it's kind of hard to tell when you can safely get off a whole combo, because she doesn't really get hit stunned. Sometimes she does, but it seems to only be after like a really high damage combo, then she only gets like knocked back for a bit. It's not like with other bosses where they'll get staggered on like every successive hit. So the Medusa is like just kind of a very, very frustrating boss to fight for that reason. Because you never know, like you might be like in the middle of like a 5-hit combo and then she suddenly winds up her Petrification I-beam attack, and by the time your attack animation finishes and you're trying to like block, she's already hit you with it. So that's the problem with that fight. And I guess to finish the point that I was making, I got sidetracked. That's why it's important to me to be honest about my opinions. Even if it means people will get mad at me, or if it means that I'm shit-talking something that a lot of people worked really hard on, it's like the alternative is just being like soulless and your praise being meaningless, because if you praise everything, then it has no value. There are plenty of ways to say that modern video games are trash without using the word woke. That's what I'm driving at. There's plenty of ways to criticize games in the capacity in their capacity as games, rather than obsessing over like whatever nonsense the devs have posted on Twitter about their product. Like, nobody should give a single shit about anything anybody says on Twitter. Except for if I decide to make a Twitter account, then you should care about what I have to say, and then you should also follow my account. I don't know why I would ever do that, but maybe I will. Oh wait, it's not Twitter anymore, right? It's X. Look at this guy. What is happening here? Okay. That's what I wanted him to do. I wanted to get full MP. Because after I get this gem here, I'm going to go back and fight the Forgotten One, and I want to fight the Forgotten One with full MP, and that single solitary gargoyle in that transitional room is the best source of MP because he's alone, and he's not that dangerous. You can just stand there with your guard up and, for example, trying to collect MP in this room would be a lot more complicated, because you'd have to like kill everything else while trying to leave one thing alive, which can be tricky in and of itself, and then the things themselves are more dangerous, and etc, etc. These guys are actually especially dangerous because they'll curse you if they hit you. So, also not a good room to try to get MP in. Cursing, I should explain this, I guess. Curse is it's a status effect that makes it so that you can't use your whip. I think you maybe can still use sub-weapons. That's how it works in like Symphony of the Night and a couple other games, I think, but I'm pretty sure that's also how it works here. Let's see how much of a fucking disaster this is. So, first door, first try. I'm guessing that this next part will not be so smooth. Although, actually, I've done this so many times that I think I kind of have a good feeling for where the platforms are. Is this going to be first try? Oh, this one's usually pretty easy. Wow, alright, first try for both of them. Go me. Good for me. I don't remember where I got that magical ticket. I don't remember if I bought it or not. Because when I play this game on Leon, I get a magical ticket from the training rooms. But in pumpkin mode, I skipped the training rooms because I don't know actually if you have to do the training rooms or not. I don't know if they're skippable. I think they are not skippable if you play as Leon, but they are if you play as Pumpkin Man and as Joe, because the training rooms are not like relevant for Joe because they involve like, what the fuck? That was so weird. Am I like the pause screen? Like I paused, and then like the fucking pointer was like spazzing out, going back and forth at the top of the menu. I have no idea what that was. I actually don't remember that happening. That's very strange. Why am I... Oh, I know what I'm doing. I was checking my max hearts to know how many times I could do the dash, because I wanted to use a heart repair to get to full hearts before the Forgotten one, but I wasn't sure how low I could go before... I wanted to make sure I was taking full advantage of the heart repair. So I just made the journey down the stairs a little bit faster. One of two giant spiral staircases, and I think this is the second break. This break really shouldn't exist, but you do the commentary with the footage you have, not the footage you wish you had. One of many harsh lessons that I've had to learn throughout this little project. So here's the break. Okay, let's try this again. This is going to be my second attempt to record commentary for this particular little segment of footage. The last one that I literally just finished, only the second half was salvageable. The first half was like plagued by this weird static sound that just spontaneously disappeared in the second half, so I don't know what the fuck that's about. But anyway, we're coming up now on the Forgotten One fight. The fight that I've been hyping up, that I've been talking about for the rest of this entire playthrough. It is significantly easier on Pumpkin Man, I would say, than it is on Leon, for the simple fact that, on the one hand, having less health does mean that you can't fuck up as much. On the other hand, the fact that the Pumpkin Man does so much more damage means that you have fewer opportunities to fuck up. So you have to play well for a much lesser period of time. Especially in Phase 1. Phase 1 is going to go by super fast, because as you can see here, the fact that I'm hitting like all 6 of his organs at the same time with the whip combo means that his health bar is just going to fucking melt. And it's really not going to slow down even once he's down to his like last little section during Phase 1. And here, like I said before, I'm using Grand Pumpkin to clear out any maggots that get too close to me, basically using that the same way that I used the Spiral Axe spell on Leon. And look at that. That Phase 1 lasted, what, like 30 seconds? If even that long. Phase 1 on Leon takes way fucking longer. And on Joe the Vampire, it's so fucking long. It takes fucking forever, because it's so much harder to clear out all the maggots. Phase 2 is similar to Phase 1 in that the fact that it doesn't go for as long makes it easier, but it's more important for the fight to be short in Phase 2, because he has a chance to do an attack once he's down to his second health bar that I don't know how to dodge. He's gonna like clench his fist and then like I know he does it in the footage, so you'll see him do it pretty soon here. But basically, the sooner I can get out of this phase, the sooner I don't have to worry about this attack. But unfortunately, as soon as he's down to his second health bar, he does this. My strategy here is to like guess when he's gonna slam his fist down, which is usually about 10 or 11 seconds after he starts, and then dodge out of the way when I think he's gonna do it. There, it works out fucking perfectly. And that looked really cool, but the thing about that is that was just kind of me hoping that would work, because usually if you try to use the wind spell, like dash spell, to dash through his blood waterfall that his fist is making, sometimes you just like hit the blood, even if you're at like the very edge of the platform. It's a very imprecise, it feels like RNG. It feels like if you try to dash through the waterfall, half of the time it'll work, half the time it won't work. And I don't really know how it's supposed to work. I still don't really know how the game expects you to dodge that attack, because it seems to me like it just like hems you in on one side of the platform and then just hits you when you can't go anywhere. But there obviously must be something I'm missing. And here, once again, the Forgotten One has only had an opportunity to do like 3 attacks, and he's already at fucking like 25% health, so Pumpkin Man bringing it home. And here is where things actually get a little bit scary. So these rocks can only take 3 fire blasts before they break, but I wasn't paying attention, and I stayed behind that rock. Look at that shit. I stayed behind that rock even though it only had 2 health left, meaning I like needed to be ready to get out of the way in case he did like a double fire breath fan back and forth. But the thing is that I just wasn't paying attention. Like, I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like keeping track of how many times each rock had been hit. Usually the way that I play that phase is I don't think about moving to a different rock until the rock I'm behind is already cracked. There, I just like wasn't expecting the rock to get... I just like wasn't paying attention to how many hits it had taken. So I was stuck behind a rock that was not going to survive another flame breath, and I just had to make like a snap decision about what to do. I mean, I could have tried going to a different rock. I think the rock on my right was still intact and maybe would have been good. But I was afraid of using the dash to get to a rock because I thought that I might accidentally dash like into the fire breath. Like if his fire breath was gonna come back from the right to the left. I didn't want to dash to the right because I thought I might dash into the fire. I also just like didn't really process what was going on until the fire breath already passed by once, meaning that all that was left was for it to go left to right, and I just had to sort of... I just had to make a panic split-second decision, and as with avoiding the fist slam with the blood waterfall, I just like got lucky, and he didn't hit me. I have no idea how that happened. I'm guessing the way it must work is that the fire breath attack that he has must only deal damage... or like check to see if it's hitting a target in like ticks. And I must have just dashed through it between ticks or something. That's the only explanation I can think of, because I went right through that thing. You can't stay on the edge of the platform and not get hit by that. It's supposed to hit you if you're not behind a rock and that fire breath passes over you, you're supposed to take damage. So that was pretty cool looking, but very much unintentional and very much not a smart, like that was not like a planned maneuver. I just got lucky. And so as a result it feels much less satisfying. But generally speaking, and it was especially important that I dodged that fire breath attack because the pumpkin's lower health is usually not relevant, but that's a situation where it could be, because that fire breath does like a lot of damage, and I feel like I don't think it would literally one-shot me, but if I were to get hit by that twice, I think I would definitely die on the pumpkin. Because I want to say it does about half HP to Leon. When I fought it on Leon, I think it did about half, or maybe about like a third. So I don't think it would be a one-shot, but it would definitely make the lower health of the pumpkin fellow relevant, which it is usually not. So that was especially lucky of me. I use Grand Pumpkin there, even though I am now trying to conserve hearts because there are no more heart expansions between me and the final boss, and I do want some wind pumpkin dash spells to be available for the Walter fight, and then especially for the death fight. On the Walter fight, the wind dash is just kind of a convenience thing. On the death fight, it's necessary to avoid some of his his attack when he like summons his little skulls that chase after you. The dash attack is really good at getting away from them. But I used Grand Pumpkin back there anyway because that one particular room with all of the lizard dragoons, that can just like go really wrong sometimes. Sometimes the dragoons will just like hit you with a big combo attack and before you know it, you suddenly just took like 100 damage from nothing. That's happened to me before on Leon. Fighting these guys is so nice with the Pumpkin Man, because the fact that they can die in one heavy attack combo means that you don't have to worry about dipping in close to get the full value out of a 5-hit combo, and you also don't have to worry about like doing 2 smaller combos to finish them. You can just fucking kill them with your big sweeping whip attack, the way that it should be. I don't even know what those guys do, by the way, the lesser demons. I want to say I saw them get an attack off like one time. An attack that wasn't just like dive bombing you on you. Excuse me. Lament of Innocence. Lament of Innocence. It is something of a lament, I guess. Oh yeah, this part is really fucking annoying. I don't like this part at all. Where what I have to do here is basically I have to go into that room that I was just in, pick up the tablet, go to the center of the second floor of the pagoda where the boss room is, get the tablet flipped, walk all the way back over here to put the tablet in the thing to get the key to the boss room, then go all the way back to the middle of the pagoda again. So basically I have to go left all the way in, middle all the way down, left all the way in, middle all the way down. And it's so obnoxious. I don't really get why they did it unless the idea was to make the last level more of a gauntlet where it's like it's not enough to just do this side of the pagoda once and I have to do it twice, but it's not hard to do this. Like when you can just run past half the enemies and the other half die in one combo, especially on Pumpkin Man. So, like a lot of the gameplay of Lament of Innocence, the fact that you're having to constantly do this, like, backtracking makes it feel like busy work, like the game is just fucking wasting your time. I don't know, again, maybe, well no, I was gonna say maybe my fault for not playing Crazy Mode, but Pumpkin Man doesn't have a Crazy Mode. Crazy Mode is a Leon only. I wonder why Walter actually has that little tablet on there. Like what's meant to be the purpose of the put squares in the thing and then turn them around thing? Maybe it just amuses him. Maybe he just like stands there pulling the lever over and over again because he thinks it's funny when the stuff flips around. That's probably it. Sorry if my voice sounds a little weird. My like. I've been having some seasonal allergies again, so that might be affecting my speech somewhat. Nothing will make you overanalyze or become anxious about how you sound than having a YouTube channel where you talk all the time. I guess that's sort of contradictory because if you're uploading videos of yourself talking to YouTube, then that would surely already imply that you're fine with how you talk, but in my case, I feel like my voice, I don't know. I think I have days where my voice sounds good, and then days when my voice sounds not as good. I think today is a not as good day. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about instead of the gameplay on the screen, because what is there to say, really? I don't want to sound too negative. I don't want to sound like I hate this game or that I think this game is bad. I think Lament of Innocence has a lot of things going for it, but there's just something missing. I think I'm coming up to the end of the recording that got fucked up, so I think there's going to be a little bit of a pause here, and then I'm going to come back in, and I might be talking about something completely different than what I was talking about now, but the good news is I'm not talking about anything now. I already finished talking about what I was going to talk about, so no harm, no foul. This is actually the first. I would say this is the first footage I've uploaded of like a joke playable character, like a joke playthrough. I would define Pumpkin Mode as a joke playable character. I guess I would also define the old Axe Armor in Portrait of Ruin the same way, which is why I skipped it, because it was just like goofy, and plus I played so much of Portrait of Ruin in the first place that it just wasn't. I felt like I'd played enough of it. Maria in Rondo is like almost a joke playthrough, but she's a lot more fun, and she's like her own distinct character who plays in a very distinct way. And you can still like die in Rondo of Blood playing as Maria. It's just harder because she's overpowered. Most of what makes her like a joke character is just kind of the nature of her cutscenes, not necessarily the nature of her as a character. Or like her gameplay. This is basically a joke. The pumpkin guy, because he's so goofy and because, like, I don't know. This is just so easy. like the fucking Forgotten One is like the hardest fight in the game, and the only reason I was ever in any trouble in that fight is because I like made just a simple like lazy mistake that I could have avoided. And I'm pretty sure that was a no. I think that was a no damage on the Forgotten One, by the way. I didn't really even notice that, but I don't remember taking a single point of damage during that fight, and I didn't even like play particularly well. I guess that dodge on the fist coming down was pretty slick, but the thing about that is that I really feel like dodging out of the way of the Forgotten One's fist by dashing through the like blood dripping out of his hand is the kind of thing that I feel like would only really work like half the time. So it doesn't really feel like something I did because I like played correctly. It feels more like I just got lucky. Same with dashing through the fire breath. So it was a no damage, but it was only a no damage because I got lucky. Is there anything at all to say about the Walter fight? It's like... It's an interesting 3D interpretation of the Dracula fight type. Would I say easier or harder than... I'd say harder than the Castlevania 64 Phase 1 of Dracula, but maybe easier than the Legacy of Darkness version. Because in Legacy of Darkness, Phase 1 of Dracula is harder because he has some like more attacks that are harder to dodge. Here, nothing this guy does is like particularly scary, and now he's just fucking dead. What a loser. Now, Death is interesting, because in the Death fight, if you stay on him for too long, he'll, like, swing his scythe in front of his body to try to, like, get you off of him. And I don't remember if that is based off of damage, or if that's based off of literally how much time you spend, like, in front of his body. I don't think it's gonna matter, because when his minions are out, he doesn't do the scythe thing. He just kind of lets you wail on him, because he's trusting that his little skull buddies will be enough to get you to run away. Fuck, I knew that was gonna happen. As soon as I didn't dash away, I fucking knew that was gonna happen. I was really hoping to end this on like a triple no damage, but oh well. That was just like bad planning on my part. What I really should... It was like bad planning and just kind of being in an awkward angle. But that's the whole point of using the wind dash thing on this fight, is that you eliminate the uncertainty related to avoiding the skulls. If you dash through them, you'll be out of their way. If you dash away from them, you'll be out of their way. This was pretty close, but I guess I got away. No, I will not. Let's see if that... No, okay. It must be based off of, like, how much time you spend in front of him, then. Deadly Tempest. So I already talked about this attack in my other video. I'll just briefly discuss again like how I dodge it. I get some distance on him, make sure I have plenty of room to run around if I think he's going to do it. Then I just double jump once, make sure to then land once the first ring of fire is past me, and then double jump again to get over the second one. And unlike in my main game footage, I don't think I horribly fuck it up at any point during this little encounter. Stop doing... He shouldn't have this attack. Like, I don't want to sound like a whiner, like, oh, this boss is too hard. But, like, the problem with that die attack isn't that it's too hard, it's that it's just a fucking waste of your time. Like, the dodge timing is really not difficult to pull off, and you can just, like, there's no reason you can't just double dodge to make it even more generous. So, like, that attack is never going to hit you unless you, like, seriously fuck up, and you can't... There's no time to hit him before or after, like, after he does it. Because he'll follow it up, like, really quickly with something else. It's not like the other two attacks, Deadly Tempest and the Scythe Throw, both are more like Lament of Innocence boss combat style stuff, where it's like his attack that you dodge, and then after you dodge the attack, you can attack him, and then it's his turn to return to attack you again. I knew that was going to happen. That was so stupid. That's why, like, the dive kick... the reason I did that is because I wanted to make sure I got, like, close enough to him to get off a full 5-hit combo, because he a couple times earlier, he'd, like, teleported away from me before my combos were finished, which was annoying me. So I did the dive instead of just a double jump, because I wanted to get close to him and make sure I had time to do that, but it ended up costing me. Oh well. So that's Pumpkin Mode. There's Ronaldo enchanting his little hand to block things and get MP, presumably. The cutscenes that we were denied, summarized in sepia-tone storyboard form. I guess the big question for Pumpkin Mode is it better than Leon Mode? I guess I would have to say no. Because his walk cycle sound is annoying, and because the fact that there's no cutscenes makes it feel like... Lament of Innocence, like the ending cutscene of Lament of Innocence, where Matthias shows up, is actually, like, really good. I actually really like that scene, and the fact that Pumpkin Mode doesn't have any of that, and, like, everything you fight just dies super fast. I don't know. I'm a big proponent of, like, fast pacing being important, and, like, I generally like games that are faster paced, but with Pumpkin Mode, something just feels, like, off. I don't really like the character's design. I don't like I know he's supposed to be silly, but I don't like his design at all, even as, like, a silly joke character. The pumpkin head is a great idea. The little, like, burlap sack body is not really what I like. So maybe if he was, like, cooler or something, or funnier in a different way, then maybe that would make up for it, but playing as the pumpkin in Lament of Innocence just, like, feels too silly. In my opinion. I mean, if you have a higher tolerance to that sort of thing, then I guess you would enjoy it more, but I like the Leon melodrama a little bit more. Plus, if this is important to you, Leon has access to more sub-weapons, so, like, more different tools. I mean, I don't know how significant those differences are, because I never found a reason to not use the axe, but if you really wanted to, if you really like this game, really like the base gameplay, and you wanted to, like, keep playing it, then you'd probably want to keep playing as Leon to try out new sub-weapons and new, like, magic arsenals. With the Pumpkin Man, you just have your one set of abilities, which are perfectly fine. Like, they covered the entire spectrum of what you'd want from sub-weapons in Lament of Innocence, but there's not much variation in what you can do. And look at him, running off with his Halloween haul. Now, how on earth is he going to eat those lollipops without any salivary glands? That's my question. Like the fact that he beats the shit out of Walter and then Walter gives him candy. Guess that's what a trick-or-treat is, huh? Well, anyway, next up is Curse of Darkness. Keep an eye out for it. Coming up soon. In the meantime, keep on Earth rocking.